WIBTA for giving my old cello to a fellow student in need and not my niece-in-law? I am not Oop. Oop is you, Waltz 428. He posted in r, am I the asshole? Since this is a story about cellos, I figured I'd offer you a cello fun fact. The oldest cello in existence is called the King. Andrea Amati built it between 1538 and 1560. It's kept in the National Music Museum in South Dakota. Source: Mood spoiler. Fucking wholesome. Less than. Original post: December 22, 2022. I've 36M. Been learning the cello for 8 years and attending the same music school since starting. I started learning late in life because I grew up in a poor family that couldn't afford things like instruments and music lessons. I met Chloe while we were both waiting to go into our lessons a few years back. We speak often about random stuff on the regular because our lessons have always fallen into the same time slot and we're both in the orchestra, etc. She's about 13. Very polite and eager to learn and treats her very cheap rubbish instrument that her parents got for her from an online store like gold. I know her parents, they're lovely people. It's all they can afford. I'm not shaming them, but if you know anything about instruments you know what I mean. It's also only 1/2 size and far too small for her, but there's not a single scratch on it and she practices every spare minute. I've recently upgraded to a performer instrument and a trade-in on my $9,000 cello would have gotten me only $4K back, so I decided to keep it and sell it myself. I'm pretty well off now, but I know what it's like to be where Chloe is. So I've taken pity on her. I usually gift her something at Christmas, like her next grade of music book, rosin, and a gift card from the local luthier to get a new bow and have her instrument serviced, but having not had time to list my old cello for sale or even know where to, my good deed strings got plucked at thinking that my old instrument would likely mean the world to someone like Chloe, whose parents will likely never afford a decent instrument for her, but stupid me mentioned this idea to my sister-in-law Gail, who has a daughter, 14F. We'll call her Alice. And she told me that Alice wants to learn the cello and insisted that I give the instrument to her daughter instead, as it's too valuable to give to a stranger's kid. Alice is her own little dude and we get along quite well, but she has never mentioned wanting to learn an instrument to me until she watched Wednesday, and now it's cool all of a sudden. Alice hasn't stuck with anything for long. She follows fads and jumps from one thing to another and is, for lack of a better word, spoiled, and based on her track record, handing her anything other than a student cello as her first instrument would be a waste, as I'm unable to convince myself that she would even practice, let alone reach a point that would call for this level of instrument. Where Chloe is at a point where yes, this instrument is slightly too big for her right now, but she needs it, and call me what you'd like for this part, but I'd feel happier about giving it away to someone that needs it like Chloe rather than someone that just wants it but is connected to me. You know? But that has me worried that I might be seen as an a-hole on this decision. Family first? The music school is putting on Christmas carols tonight and I intend to gift the cello to Chloe at the end, but I'm still conflicted about it. Relevant comment. Pity was a terrible word to pick, tbh. I just couldn't think of the word I'd have preferred. Relate is what I mean, but couldn't think of it. I can relate to Chloe's position from my own experience in being from a poor background. The word count didn't allow me to be more descriptive, and I had to chop a lot of what I described of their family. I didn't mean to come off as thinking of them being beneath me in any way. I just see a lot of my own upbringing in them, and it doesn't bring back terrific feelings. Oop is voted NTA, with almost everyone saying he should give the cello to Chloe after talking to her parents. Update comment. Later that night. Wow, so many comments. Thank you to everyone that took the time to help me steady my nerves on this one and point me in what I felt was the right decision from the start, but second-guessing myself. I've just gotten home from the carols. Some people mentioned asking Chloe's parents for permission to gift her the cello, and I'm glad this was mentioned because it was something that I hadn't considered, and it led to what I feel was the perfect outcome. Everyone had settled after the students had finished the show, and parents and volunteers brought cakes etc. to share, and everyone was standing around chatting. Chloe ran off to join the line to get her bag of lollies and goodies, and it gave me a moment to approach her folks without having to mention my intention in front of Chloe before knowing how it would be received by them. I was nervous as hell, but opened with my usual compliments on Chloe's playing. She played What Child Is This? In a quartet, and it was perfect. And I made a light-hearted joke about her growing too quickly and dwarfing her cello now. Her parents laughed but went on to mention how they've been saving to buy her a bigger one, and that they didn't want to go cheap this time like they had with her first couple. Having learned a lot very quickly about quality, but when they'd taken Chloe to the luthier with the intention of getting her one for Christmas, they'd been disappointed to find out that they hadn't saved enough for the quality that Chloe needed, and that they'd been devastated despite Chloe understanding and taking the revelation quite well. Figuring that a new cello was kind of something they'd worked hard on getting for Chloe, I decided to try and get them in on the idea and ask them how much they'd saved and would they be interested in buying my old one, as I had a new one now and had no need for it. But I didn't notice that Chloe had approached back from the line, and she piped up with a low tone that they hadn't even saved enough for the student quality instruments, let alone mine. She has a good idea of how much instruments are worth. I stumbled on my words a little, but I went on to insist on knowing how much they'd saved, and her mother told me that they'd saved around $1,600. I told them that that sounded like a good enough offer to me, and that I'd be happy to know that it was being played and cherished by someone like Chloe that would take good care of it, and I held out my hand to shake on the deal. No one answered for what felt like an hour to me. Chloe's father finally responded and told me that they couldn't accept it, as Chloe had pointed out an instrument of equal value to mine to them while they were in the shop, and he didn't feel it was right to take it for anything but a fair value, and that they couldn't afford to do that. I'll admit that I felt a little bit annoyed by his initial good-mannered refusal, but I understood it, as I was raised by similar-minded parents with the same values. But I told her parents that it was an offer that I felt that they really couldn't pass up, as it was something that I felt Chloe had earned and needed desperately, and that even if they didn't accept my offer, I was going to give it to Chloe anyway. And I turned and placed the hard case in front of the shocked and dead silent Chloe and walked away. Chloe's father approached me while we were helping pack up the entertainment hall, and he gave me a hug and thanked me, promising to drop off the money at my shop in the morning and offering to help me out if ever I needed anything. For a stubborn bloke like that to be as red and teary as he was makes me sure that I did the right thing in making him accept the cello like I did. Chloe was visibly quite emotional, but trying not to show it, but she broke down after mouthing thank you to me as everyone was leaving, and I found it extremely hard to keep my composure and could only manage a smile and a thumbs up in return. I think I'm going to be riding this high for a good while. The best thing is I can tell Gail that I sold it without having to lie, and I can toss up the idea of using the money Chloe's dad pays me for the cello to buy a reasonable second-hand learner's instrument for Alice. Again, thank you too for the responses and advice. Relevant comment. Wow, this blew up. Wasn't expecting this. I've read a lot of the replies and greatly appreciate the awards and the idea that this put a smile on people's faces. While the idea of getting Chloe's old instrument to give to Alice would be a great idea, The issue with it is that Chloe's cello is only 1/2 size and would be far too small for Alice, who definitely needs a full-sized instrument. And according to Chloe's dad, when he popped in today, Chloe was saying that she'd like to keep her old instrument as it is sentimental to her, but he was eventually able to convince her into them trying to sell it because the one that I gave her will need maintenance, services, and to be insured, which I'm in full support of them doing. I've decided to keep the peace with my in-laws as best I can. I shut my shop early today and drove a few towns over to pick up a decent second-hand cello for Alice that I spotted on FB Marketplace a while back that was thankfully still available. It's black, which is her go-to color for everything. So hopefully Alice will appreciate the color more, as mine was a polished mahogany red. It needs a service, but it's a good instrument and came with a hard case, a decent bow, rosin, and preliminary grade music books. Sold by parents that purchased it for their son that never picked it up after getting it. Let's hope that's not a sign of its future and that Alice proves me wrong. Then I might just end up being the a-hole after all. Gail has a greedy streak in her, yes, but I'm trying to convince myself that she wasn't just seeing dollar signs and hopefully just wanted a good quality instrument for Alice to learn on. She tends to try and not go for bottom of the line in anything when she purchases something for her kids, as she does like to point out stuff's value when she does get something. Yes, she's one of those people, and claims that she isn't aware of how abrupt and rude she is at times. Her real middle name is actually Karen Lal, and we've often joked about it affecting her behavior at times, but she doesn't appear to be learning from it. Thank you again for all the feedback, and I'm glad that I was able to share the good vibes around that I got out of this. Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year to you all. As a professional musician, this whole post made me so freaking happy. Wishing Oop and Chloe further success in their cello studies. And hopefully Alice sticks with cello. I am happy he gave the cello to who deserves it, but also bought one for his niece. Hopefully sister-in-law does not make a sour face and shows she wanted the expensive one. I thought things were going to go south there for a minute, but I'm glad it all worked out. I'll admit that I felt a little bit annoyed by his initial good-mannered refusal, but I understood it as I was raised by similar-minded parents with the same values, but I told her parents that it was an offer that I felt that they really couldn't pass up, as it was something that I felt Chloe had earned and needed desperately, and that even if they didn't accept my offer, I was going to give it to Chloe anyway. And I turned and placed the hard case in front of the shocked and dead silent Chloe and walked away. This is so hilarious. Too bad. It's yours now. Quote. Even if Alice winds up being a world-class cellist, Oop will never be the awe for selling it to Chloe. Right now it means way more to Chloe than Alice. If Alice is meant for the cello, a poorer quality starter instrument won't make any difference. You don't give a 16-year-old kid a Veyron for their first car. Alice is her own little dude is a great phrase. When I was a year older than that age, I outgrew my student model saxophone. It had been a rent-to-own program and we owned it. But it has been 4 years and I was never going to sound any better on it. We upgraded my mouthpiece and reeds. Just as important, closer it is to your mouth on a wind instrument, the more important it is. But it still didn't cut it. So we start to look around for a new one. I had an idea of good ones. I knew what was awesome. I went to several music stores to play test some used professional models. I didn't quite fall in love with anything that was in our price range, middle class and all, and so we kept at it. Driving farther to other stores, ran across our neighbor one day, who was a saxophone professor at a college an hour or so away and gave private lessons. Mentioned we were looking, and he said he'd keep an eye out. called us a week later to come over and try out a horn he'd gotten at a pawn shop. It was beautiful, brand new, still in the packaging. A reputable, long-standing brand. Selmer Paris for anyone in the know. Specifically a Super Action 80 Series 2. Series 3 were released 4 or 5 years after this, I think. I played it and it was incredible. He sold it to my parents for what he paid for it. $1,500 or so. The horn retails brand new from the factory dealers at the time for $5,000. He could have gotten more from us. But helping out someone who eat, slept, breathed music and was a total band dork before it was cool, and planning on doing it my entire life, was more important. I used that horn all through high school and college and for a little after. I teach elementary music now, so it doesn't get played that often. But it undoubtedly had an impact on what I did. Oh? Not going to accept my $1,600? How about free? And I walk away not allowing you to argue any longer. Is a hilarious way to respond to the initial father response. This is happening. Runs away. Quote. Damn, was refreshing to read. I wonder if, in addition to getting his niece the other cello, Oop could have offered to teach her the basics or play with her. Nothing is going to keep her interested like someone else who's enthusiastic about it. And he could have gauged for himself pretty easily whether she would keep at it or not. In his sister's shoes, I think the second-hand instrument plus the time spent would be more than equal to the cello he gifted Chloe. But that's me. All in all, it's a great story. Though, I'll be happy to read it next Christmas. Unlike Oop, I absolutely believe the Sil wanted the instrument to sell eventually. But who knows? Maybe there'll be a miracle and the kid will stick with something she started for once in her life. Nothing wrong with that, and we get one more musician in the world out of it. With a mother that seems to care more about her image than the experiences and opportunities she's providing her daughter. The odds look pretty long though. Oop gets all the applause for pulling off their end goal and managing to come up with an alternative that still helps out the niece-in-law. I love this story. Thank you. It makes me so happy. I used to work for a mission-based organization that fed and clothed the needy and rebuilt low-income homes. We had a food kitchen and everything. I didn't get paid much, but I loved the job. I was the office manager and took applications for our programs. A family whose home had just burned down came in with their 12-year-old daughter. I gave them info on everything we could help with. I learned the daughter lost her guitar in the fire. I had a student guitar of my own. I told them to come back the next day, which they did. The look on the daughter's face when I gave her my guitar will always stay with me. I wonder about her often and how that little guitar is doing. I went out that next pay and bought myself a nice seagull and have it to this day. Thank you, Op. Spreading love like this brings hope to the future. That's one of those moments that Oop, the kids, and her parents will never forget. Like one of those waypoints in life. This tugs at the heartstrings for sure. I hope Chloe gets many hours of playing out of that cello. Aw, thank you for sharing this one. My 15Y. Started playing violin and piano many years ago, but never really practiced or cared until she spent time with a friend like Chloe who puts all of herself into her music. Saxophone. Her friend inspired her and now she practices a ton, takes private lessons in both, and derives so much joy from playing. Wish I had a decent sax to give BC. Her friend's parents are in a similar financial position and I'm pretty sure she's using a school rental. As a cellist, this makes me really happy. The niece shouldn't have gotten a new cello yet. Not because she's being spoiled or entitled or anything, but because cello is a very hard instrument. I've played a lot of other instruments, Cello has the steepest learning curve. Most people give up after about 6 months to a year because they don't realize how long it takes to get a half-decent sound. You can usually rent a cello for $60 $100. Entry level, which gives the student a chance to test out if they enjoy playing. It also is a chance to start learning about what you like about the instrument so that when you do invest, you know what is important to you. Size, sound, etc. To spend a couple thousand before trying just seems nuts to me. Me at the $9,000 cello flushed. Oop is a real G, diplomat, and likely cellist too. Extraordinaire. When I graduated high school, I was losing my loaner clarinet. It was not my best instrument, but it was my only concert band instrument. And my college only offered concert band out of the ensembles I was qualified to play in. An old teacher of mine found out about this. He played multiple instruments. As he was getting older, he was focusing more on some of them, and was no longer playing clarinet. At one of the graduation concerts, he gave his clarinet to me. I cried. That is so nice. My younger son, 14, plays the cello in his high school orchestra, and has for a few years. We used to rent, but since he's into it we decided to buy one for him. Holy shish tea. Apparently the place we were renting from sells really high-end performance stuff. The bow alone was quoted at like $1,000. We ended up finding a decent one online from an actual cello violin maker. Not Amazon or something. That came pre-strung with a nice hard case of bow, etc. For a reasonable price. It's certainly good enough for his level. The kicker is that he's grown to be about 6 feet 4 inches in the past year. So he towers over the thing even though it's full-sized. And it's getting a little awkward to play. Especially when he's on stage next to the other orchestra members. We asked him if he'd like to switch to bass and he was just, it's hard enough to lug this thing around. A bass would be an even bigger pain in the ass. As it is, the cello barely fits in our car with him in there. I am not a professional musician, but I do have some understanding that the price of string instruments that are sufficient for dedicated musicians is not just expensive because of the material quality but due to the specific needs of the musician. I feel like I would be very terse if someone suggested I give an incredibly expensive tool to someone who is a relative novice. This cello in particular is beyond the needs of someone looking for a cool hobby. It would be like getting a performance racing car for a kid who just got his learner driver permit.
If you enjoyed this video, please check out our playlists full of similar content. WIBTA is like doom scrolling for your ears. Please like, share, and subscribe.